Hello, everybody.
Hello. How's it going?
Good.
Good.
I knew it was going to be a bit late, and I'd given permission to Vanda to start the meeting, but I guess she's just not here yet.
No, I was getting a little nervous, Nancy.
Yeah.
Because I can't get in either. It just
Yeah.
started either. So
I was like, am I in the right place? I was nervous. Everyone waiting for me. There she is.
Welcome, Vanessa. Just bear with us while we get started. We'll give it a few minutes. Hey, Vanda.
Everyone, hi
Stephanie.
there. Hello. All right. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
I'm just going to.
We need
Sorry, I should have
Bobby.
had my camera on, shouldn't I? Waiting for Bobby, and I just changed a few things my side.
Okay. Our recording has already started, so if anybody doesn't want to be recorded, feel free to drop and watch it later. This will be posted on YouTube by the Dynamics user group. Hello, Vanda. Good to see you.
Finally, yeah, I'm just tweaking a few settings here as I switch. I put a nighttime sky on because I'm over in Europe. There we go.
There we go. That's a nice background.
There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to wait for Bobby. I had a look on Meetup and it looked like in total there are 24 of us today. So I hope people keep their word and
Show up.
join us. So it was looking promising for sure.
Has anyone else been hit by the flu that's going around?
I have sickness in my house at the moment, so I have trying to stay safe.
my gosh.
My son is home. They had strep A, so they call it scarlet fever, which makes it seem very scary, but it's really just strep. My daughter had it first, and then he had it, so he's downstairs, and he was so demanding today. He's like finally feeling, when they're finally feeling better, they're on like day 2 of antibiotics, like their spirits are back up, and he's asking all these questions, demanding all these snacks. And I'm on like day 5 of a flu. It's just
Wow.
Well, I'm excited about the change management topic.
Me too.
Love to see that. Yeah. I was just on with a large global client with Microsoft, and they were explaining, and it's Microsoft's contact center.
Okay.
The part of the organization that answers calls from consumer Xbox consumers and the business to business. Like if you have problem with Azure or Dynamics or whatever, like they take all those calls, right? Like I think they said, I'd have to look up the numbers. It was hundreds of millions of calls a year.
Oh my God.
We were talking about how they introduced Copilot into their organization and how they might have done it a little bit differently, reflecting on on their journey.
Oh, here's Will. Let Will in. That's fine. Hi, Will.
Hey, everybody.
Well, I will.
I'm going to start looking for the deck that Bobby would normally present in case he's late. Let me just pull it up.
Okay.
So we can get started.
I think Madison put it in the email, Nancy, as well. She put a link in there.
Oh, I was just going to take one that I had from before.
I think it's always the same. I don't think it's necessarily different, but just in case it was easier for you to find it in email, I can forward it to you as well if you like.
Sure,
Okay.
that would be good.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Or maybe just get it over to you.
Or you can run it if you want. Like that's fine if you want to pull it up.
I wasn't planning on being on camera too much with this.
Yeah, I can talk to the slides. Just if you want
I can pull it up. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you everybody
I
for joining us. Yeah, we're here newly named Dynamics User Group. We were formerly talking about enterprise excellence, and we wanted to be further inclusive to help people understand that this is not just for enterprises. So hopefully the name, would love the feedback from anybody. We've extended it, and it's, you know, calling it more about managers and administrators. So it's from the business perspective. How do I, you know, what are the best practices I need to think about, you know, from an implementation perspective and beyond? Like, you know, the implementation is only part of the program. The program continues as you get new releases. How do you, you know, handle change management, that sort of thing. And then administrators, how do they handle ongoing updates? So we wanted to, you know, pick a name that would cover that sort of end-to-end ongoing legacy of a Dynamics implementation, whether it's CRM or ERP. Would also apply to Power Platform. So we're looking at various topics through that whole life cycle. And today we're going to specifically speak about the change aspect of an organization. So I'm going to continue talking until the slides get pulled up. So we have typically in this meetup a guest speaker that talks about a particular aspect of an implementation or ongoing part. And then we have a favorite feature aspect. So we have Stephanie here today, who I'll let you introduce yourself when we get there. Stephanie's going to talk about that all important, how do we handle change in the organization when we're implementing initially or long term, like, you know, change is just an ongoing process. And then we have Will here, who's a return speaker. He talks a lot about in our community about AI, and we have a segment in our meetup around my favorite feature. Tanya's and Jen was here the last time talking about, you know, favorite features in dynamic sales. Will's going to talk a little bit about his favorite features in AI that might be of interest to us, you know, either from a developer perspective or an end user perspective. So did we lose?
I'm just looking for the slides if because I don't think Bobby's joined us yet, has he? So I'm just trying to dig them out and give you some support. So just bear with me because I know Madison sent them.
Okay, so we run this program monthly. We're always open to feedback on different topics. Last time we talked about testing. We had LeapWork. I don't know if any of you are familiar with LeapWork. They have a tool that tests across Dynamics, so both CRM and ERP. Very interesting. They presented, if you're interested in, again, you know, Copilot and AI is a big theme with Microsoft. If you're interested in wondering, like, how am I going to test generative AI? Like, what, you know, how do I know if I have the right answer or not? They have some tools that they showed us last time, and that the recording of that meetup is available on YouTube through the Dynamics User Group. We've also had other tools shown to us. We talked about end-to-end. I think it was SEER 365. We talked with them about how do you design, deliver tests successfully with traceability from requirements right through to end user training. So that's a utopian view for a few of us. I can tell you at Avanade, we still struggle with that. So that's an ongoing challenge. Okay, so the slides are in the chat. Let me pull that up.
They are, yeah.
Sorry, my Teams crashes the minute I was going to share, but I can share too, Nancy, if you like.
I'm
Are
on
you
it.
going to
I've
share,
got
Tanya?
it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can. Yep, I'm ready to share if you like. I just didn't want to interrupt you, so just
go
give me
ahead.
1 second.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Is there anybody that doesn't know what the Dynamics User Group is in this call? Okay, so I'll ask it the other way. Who does know what the Dynamics User Group is? Who wants to give a thumbs up?
How do we exist? Why do we exist?
There we go.
Okay. If it's okay, Nancy, I'm not going to put in presenter mode just because it's giving me some trouble. So
Okay. So we're here for a meetup today, and let's talk about the Dynamics user group. You know, the user group itself is 45,000 community members. It just shows you how impactful Dynamics is and how much it's grown. Over time, I've been involved with Dynamics since basically when it started in the early 2000s. And I'm really happy to see that we have this free community available across the platform. So it covers Dynamics, CRM, GP, Business Central, Finance and Supply Chain, I think is what it's called now instead of F&O. But it's the longest running independent community. So we're very happy to be presenting this today and representing Doug. So if we go to the next slide, the thing that's important here is we're bringing these meetups because we're trying to be very educational and want the audience to benefit from the education. So even if we're bringing on ISV partners or others, we're very mindful that it's education, and we refrain from doing any kind of sales pitch whatsoever. So it's very open, inclusive. Feel free to ask questions, stop us at any time. You know, we love to hear from you. Now, we do run several different types of ways you can engage, which is on the next slide. So there's the meetups, of course, which you're joining today, but there's also, you know, webinars. I encourage my practice to, you know, participate in the forums, join the webinars, join our virtual events. You know, there's other events as well, but it's all free programming. So, you know, please take advantage of all the resources that are available. And the upcoming events on slide 5. So this meetup we run virtually, and anybody can attend from any part of the world. So please, you know, bring your friends and family and have them attend. But if you want to attend something local in person, you can see here in March, if you're local to Philadelphia, there'll be a regional meetup there. So it's an in-person programming. I'm from Canada, so I can talk a little bit about the Toronto event. We ran a really awesome event in November. We're sort of rinse and repeating, and we had such a great attendance. We're doing it 2 days, and we have a full conference type format where you can pick tracks across the different product areas. So really looking forward to that. You can see we're expanding globally into the African countries. So there's events going on there. And then if we move to slide 6, you can see other areas that you can have the opportunity to participate in person. And the best part about in person is encouraging you to come to the Chicago event in May, where we're anticipating about 3,000 to 4,000 people. I was fortunate to be able to go last year. Great event. Hoping to be speaking again. I am speaking again. I got too many things going on. I am speaking again at this event. But you can see as a meetup member, we do have a code for you to use. I guess it's by tomorrow. That you know would get you a free pass. It really helps when you're like, I have a mentee. I run a mentorship program also through Dynamics User Group, and my mentee wasn't going to go to this event. I met up with her last year because she just wasn't going to get approval. And when we were able to share that there was a free entrance, and all she has to do is pay for her hotel and in flight in the US, it was a no-brainer. So she'll be there. Super excited for that. So that's the introductory slides about Doug. Anybody have any questions on that before I start introducing our session today? Okay, all good. So let me start with introducing myself. I'm Nancy Calder. I have been in, as I said, in Dynamics for a long time, in CRM even longer. Today, my current role is with Avanade. I lead our global CRM practice, which is about 3,000 practitioners. And I'm involved with this because I want to give back to our community and help people understand how you can have great careers and great solutions, helping people in their day-to-day lives with everything, the tasks that they have to do. So very passionate about this. And we have a couple of passionate speakers here today. We have Stephanie, as I said at the outset here. She's going to talk about change management. I know she's super passionate about it because I had the fortune of seeing her presented in the in-person Canada event. So I'm still doing this. Yeah, we'll get to that. And then, as I said, Will, he'll share some content on the AI side. And then we'll come back at the end. We'll talk a little bit about our next meetup, encourage you to come back. Like I said, bring friends and family. We're trying to grow this and get the word out. So would be very happy for you to bring people with you. So are you ready, Stephanie, to take over the screen share? All good?
I'm ready. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Perfect. Great. Can you see my slides?
We can.
Perfect. And I actually also did my little power pose right before this to boost me up to get some energy. And for me, I find, so today we're going to talk about navigating through D365 implementations and using change management. And my approach is leading with empathy and leading with people first, where a lot of these implementations, we tend to think that they're mostly about technology, but it's really about the people that are involved in the project and the people that are involved within the company. And so my role is really just always to make sure that we have that mindset going into these implementations and throughout, to make sure that we have that human element to make people feel heard and seen. There we go. So a little bit about me. So I'm based in Montreal, Quebec. I speak English and French, and I'm actually kind of a newbie. I've been in the Dynamics world since 2021. And I have, in that short time span, I've done 18 implementations. I'm currently on my 19th right now. And I led OCM at the Heiko Companies, and the Heiko Companies is a holding company that has companies globally. And so those 18 implementations were all around the world with different cultures and different companies and different industries. And it really gave me different insights and perspectives to all different types of implementations. And so it really kind of influenced a lot in all the slides that you're going to see today. So what are we going to cover today? So today we're going to look at what is change management, really, why do we need it? A common question that I hear asked. Why resistance to change is inevitable. It's something that's common, it's something that everyone's going to feel, and it's really how can we manage it more with an empathetic ear? How can we get our team on board? I'm going to look at some strategies to how we can engage our people, engage your stakeholders, and go through some very simple ways to even make the toughest transitions successful. So for anyone that did attend my session in person, these slides are somewhat similar, a little bit different. I'm also going to be speaking at DynamicsCon talking about resistance. So if some of these topics resonate with you, then I really hope that you come and see me in Chicago and learn a little bit more. So what is change management? I find that change management can be a very big word, and it can mean so many different things to so many different people. But at the core, I really like this graphic because I think it really depicts, for me at least, what change management is. So on the top, if we look at change management in a simplistic way, where we just need to get people from point A to point Z, we build D365, we look at our requirements, we look at the processes, we look at our all of the different steps, we move through our implementation, and at the end we have this beautifully built system that we present to the business, and the business is kind of thinking, okay, well, maybe I wouldn't have done it that way, or why was it done in this way? And oh, how come I wasn't involved? When we invite people into the change, which is more for me, what change management is, it's bringing people into the changes that are occurring and allowing them, oh, sorry, there was an echo, and allowing them to really understand and be a part of the process. If we bring them in slowly but surely and allow them to add their own personal touch or add their own input into the implementation, at the end, you're going to see that people feel much more bought in because they really feel like they were a part of the process. So we have change management on these projects really because my role is to prepare individuals for the change that's going to come. There is a lot of things that occur during a project that are not necessarily black or white. There's a lot of gray areas where everyone has a very individual feeling when it comes to change, and everyone approaches different problems in a very different way. And so it's my role to really help each individual person to guide them through the implementation so that they feel supported. Through that, we support teams, functions of teams, and we help manage the change. Change management and managing change isn't actually quite necessarily the same thing. So change management is really more the holistic view of how we approach the change, and managing the change is really getting your hands dirty and helping people and providing solutions and providing coaching opportunities for people to feel successful. So this is probably one of my favorite slides. These are for anyone, I don't know if anyone on the call knows what these are. I'm sure most people do. If I showed this to my 5-year-old son, he would have absolutely no idea. He'd probably think that they were building blocks. But VHS tapes, if we think back to when the VHS tape turned to a DVD, I remember so vividly that my parents were in this struggle. It was like, do we buy the DVD player? Do we get the DVD and the VHS player? And we actually got the DVD and the VHS player because people weren't quite sure which direction to go in. Some people were so married to the VHS. They loved the VHS. They didn't want to deal with the DVD. They didn't want to deal with the disc. They didn't want to deal with the new technology. It was too much for them to handle. But if you think back in hindsight, the VHS tape, having to rewind it before you brought it back to Blockbuster, having to rewind it ever so carefully to rewind your favorite scene without pressing the button too hard to go all the way back to the beginning. There were so many frustrations with the VHS tapes where with DVDs, you could easily go from one scene to the next. You can choose different chapters. You can look at features. You could look at all these different things, and it really brought us into this new era. And then we look at where we are now, where it's so far from where DVDs were years ago, where now my kids don't even know what commercials are. And so the change happens so often in everything that we do. Even if you're just changing your toothpaste, changing your mascara, there's all these little moments throughout our lives where we experience these monumental change. And so this is really just to kind of get us in that mindset where when we're going through a D365 implementation, and especially kind of speaking more if we're looking at the businesses that are affected and then the administrators that are administering it, or the implementation partners that are coming in to help, you have two different people coming in where there are people who are experts who do this every day and have done this multiple times. And you have the business this is their first exposure to D365. This is the DVD for them. And we really need to make sure and like kind of meet them where they are and meet them with empathy so that we understand how scary it is for them. Because resistance is such a taboo word and people don't like to hear it and it makes it feel very negative, but it's so natural. For me, resistance is such a natural reaction to change. And it actually means that you care. It means that you're paying attention. And so really, but when managed properly, resistance can actually be a benefit. It can actually be a positive in your project. And so that's what we're going to look at in the next couple of slides around. I think resistance is one of the things that I come into the most in my role. The amount of emails and calls where I get on the side where, I think this person is starting to become resistant, or I think this person isn't necessarily on board. How do we flip them? And, one of the things with resistance, it's not about flipping people. It's not about changing who they are. It's about giving them a different perspective and meeting them where they are and giving and meeting their needs. Resistance can look different for everybody. The resistance zoo, this is something that comes from ProSci, and I just love this graphic because not only is it comical and it kind of gives humor to resistance, but it allows you to kind of see the different characters that can come out from resistance. And here, one of my favorite ones is actually the owl, wise and knowledgeable. No one would really think that someone who's wise and knowledgeable would be resistant. No one would, usually you would go towards the mule, someone who's stubborn in their ways, who doesn't want to change, or, maybe the ostrich, they put their head in the sand and they don't really want to listen to anything. They close their doors. They're not really attending any of those meetings. I find that it's important to know that resistance can present itself in different ways and to not be scared of it. I think putting perhaps an animal picture associating to it makes it feel less scary and makes you feel a little bit more empowered to approach it. And one of the things I think, especially when dealing with these types of issues on a project, people always worry that, I'm worried to be too engaged with one of my team members, or I'm worried to ask too many questions because I don't want them to completely lose interest. But I think that when someone is exhibiting resistance, they're actually calling out for help. So the resistance is actually something that allows you the opportunity to listen, to be an active listener, and to think, okay, well, maybe some of the things that they're saying will actually bring value to the project, or maybe some of the things that they're saying actually have clout. Maybe we do rely too much on ADO. Maybe we're not necessarily looking at the reality of where we are in our project, and we're looking too much at the numbers. We're focusing on Excel sheets. And so if we always just take it as a negative reaction, or kind of take it personally, especially the further you go into an implementation, the more personal everything feels. So I think putting it in this way to know that resistance is just feedback in a different form. So when I was in person, I was thinking of how can I also explain the journey of a D365 implementation, and how can I also explain why it's so important to communicate, why it's so important to have change management, to make sure that that person element is also there. And kind of occurred to me that, I don't like surprises. I hate surprises. And so I thought, if I were to be going on a trip, and this did actually happen to me. I was going on a trip and it was fully planned. I knew where we were going. I knew where I was staying, but that's it. I did not know the itinerary. I didn't really know what to pack because I wasn't sure where we were going to go for dinner, what events we were going to do while we were there. And I did know who was going, but I didn't know all the details. And it was extremely stressful for me to be able to get onto a plane and really, put my fate at the hands of all these other people. And so I don't know how many of you would be ever very comfortable with that, or even having someone that you don't know choose dinner. You're going for dinner with a large group. Maybe you have allergies. Maybe you have, very particular tastes. And there is one person that's responsible for choosing the restaurant that you're going to be going to. If you're not asked for your input, you're obviously going to be very resistant, and you're not going to buy into the trip. You're not going to be excited for the trip. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be anxious. Be like, you might not even know if you're taking a plane. Do I bring my passport? Do I bring my jacket? Do I bring my boots? Are we going to Montreal? Is it snowing? There's so many questions that are swirling around in your head, and those mimic the rumors and the ruminations that people have on these projects, where a lot of the times decisions are made for them in a very small microcosm, usually within a PMO or usually sometimes within senior leadership or executive sponsors. And the project team, the ones that are carrying out the tasks, the ones that are getting on that plane and taking that trip, they feel really left out. And so by creating more opportunity to say, well, would you like to go somewhere warm or would you like to go somewhere cold? Well, I would like to go somewhere warm. Okay, great. So you'd like to go somewhere warm. Can you swim? No, I can't swim. Okay, good. That's good for me to know. So to start just understanding your audience just gives you that much more of a leg ahead. So there's a few ways that you can do this. And one of the most important ways to do this is really to define the why. This can be done, honestly, this can be done at any point in the project. At the beginning, it can be done pre-project, which is actually ideal, or it can be done right at the very beginning. And the why is so important because it defines the vision. And the why, sometimes it evolves, because usually at the beginning, the vision statement that's created for these projects are extremely vague, and there's a lot of, fancy smancy words that usually are incorporated in the vision statements. And sometimes as you go along, I've noticed in the project that I'm currently in, we had a vision statement at kickoff that's still valid, but the team no longer aligned themselves with it because they were so far past it. And so we actually created a new why and a new vision statement. And I asked, now that you know what you know, and now that you are much more champions in the system, what is your vision statement? And what is your why? And what are your definitions of success? And it was just really interesting and refreshing to hear them. And when they were able to articulate their why, they also had these little light bulbs that came on and thought, oh, I actually do know why. And I actually can give a valuable, statement on how I think that this solution can really benefit my business. So it allows them to understand, oh, I've done some learning and I know where I am and I know what I want to do. So this could happen that's why I'm saying it could happen at any point. And the point of the why is for people to have that guiding star so that they know what they're working towards and that they can feel that motivation for themselves and for their team. So getting your team on board. So once you know your why, once you have your vision statement, once you have your PowerPoint slides and all of your things, you really want to make sure that you have the right people around the table. So you want to make sure that you have extremely clear communication. Communication is key. And just like I said, for planning a trip or for anything that there is, anything in your life, for relationships, for work, for school, you need to make sure that you have very clear and transparent communication. People value that. They want to feel heard. They want to feel safe. And to feel safe, they need to know all the facts. And so that means you need to communicate. Stakeholder alignment is also extremely important. Well, I have a slide on that a little bit later, but really, like, who are your stakeholders? Do you know who they are? Do you have them all mapped out? And do you know how they feel about the project? And leadership buy-in, this is probably also one of the ones that's extremely important because the leaders at the top, they really dictate the culture. They dictate the feeling of the project. If the people at the top are negative, or if the people at the top are unsure, you can guarantee that that's going to trickle down within their teams. I know I was on a project. It was actually one of my first projects, and I was sitting in a room with the head of operations and I think the head of sales. And granted, we were in a closed door meeting, but they were pretty negative about the project. And, I went to the president and I said, I think we really need to make sure that our narrative is very clear when we have leadership sitting in a meeting amongst people on the project team, that we at least keep our narrative really positive. And so he agreed with me, but he thought, no, they're just negative in meetings, but when they go outside, they're totally fine. And I said, sometimes we think that, and we would like to feel that, but people really feel their energy and people really look up to them. So it's so important for them to be bought into our vision. So how does leadership do this? Leadership is important to communicate the vision. It is your job to make sure that everybody understands what they need to do and how they need to do it. That they know that they can come to you if they have any issues, that you're a safe space. Model the change. So lead by example. You don't know all the answers. You don't have all the answers. And I don't think that anyone expects the leaders to. So it's okay to say that you don't know, or to say that's a really good question. Why don't we look into that together? And also the leader's role is really to empower the team, right? To make sure that they have the right motivation behind them, that there's going to be ebbs and flows to every project. And when we get into those valleys, it's so important for leadership to be able to recognize that and to help the project team push through. So for stakeholders, it's important to identify who your stakeholders are. Sometimes stakeholders are very obvious. So let's say the head of sales, the head of procurement, the head of supply chain, the head of give me another head finance. And so sometimes those are obvious, but then sometimes there's some obscure stakeholders where there are outliers of people that are also affected by the project that either are leaders or, you know, various different people. So it's always important to really take the time to think about who is this impacting and who is going to be affected by this. Making sure to involve them in the discussions. As I've said, my core thing is you really need to co-collaborate on anything that you're doing. If you don't, it's really not going to work. And once you do that, you're going to be able to gather so many insights, because the more people that you talk to, the more things that you're going to understand about how to make it successful. So whether you are a consultant going in to support a business, or if you're an internal person who is managing the change internally within your team, you're still going to kind of get those little nuances within each department, and you're really going to slowly start to understand how I can support each in a very individual and specific way. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Obviously, it's extremely important to communicate. And one of the things, especially, is really to have a clear plan. And here, you'll see I outline more things for Copilot, just to kind of give, an example. But when we look at what we want to communicate, we look at who we've spoken to, what they've said, what do we want in terms of communicating our vision, and we put together a plan. Change management, it's very common to have, these very large Excel sheets and all of these communications all mapped out. And it's extremely important to have that, because you do need to make sure that you're aligning with all of the milestones in the project, that you're being very proactive to all of the things that will occur. But at the same time, I do think that when you're creating a plan, being clear also means that I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months from now. I don't necessarily know how people are going to feel in 6 months from now. And so creating a detailed outline is also allowing room to be agile, allowing room to be in a position where, oh, you know what, we have a group who's doing really, really well, and we really want to communicate their best practices and show that and showcase that to the rest of the team. So it's very important to remember that when you're communicating or when you're creating anything around change management, that nothing is set in stone, that everything kind of moves around, and that it's better to be agile than to be inflexible. It's important, to highlight the benefits. People want to know, why is this good for me? What's in it for me? Why is this going to make my life better? This part is also important to remember that, unfortunately, it's not always going to be bunnies and roses and hearts and rainbows. Some of these things, some of their processes might be more lengthy. Some of them might have more clicks. We're working with one of our teams right now in a warehousing department where one of the processes goes from 20 seconds to 1 minute. you wouldn't never really thought that that would be too much of an issue, but it really is something that is causing concern. So how can we make sure that those 40 seconds don't cause people too much gripe? And so it's really important to make sure that we highlight the benefits, but also to still talk about the challenges. And when we're communicating, let's make sure that I read a stat on LinkedIn the other day where only about 2% of emails that are mass sent are actually open and read. 2% seems crazy to me, or it's extremely low, but I don't doubt it. The amount of emails that I have sent and I've gotten no response, you're not really sure if people read it, you're not really sure how people felt, and I always make sure to have multiple different channels. So if I'm sending something, I don't rely just on email. Sometimes companies have app space boards, TVs that are all around the plants or TVs that are in the offices. Always work with the teams and look at like the marketing teams or the communication team of what works best here and how can I best communicate to get the word across. And finally, I don't know if this is going to work. Let me see if my music is going to work. Let me know if do you hear my music?
Not
I
just
don't hear it.
yet.
Not yet. Did you share with audio?
Some audio.
The audio.
I tried to. Let me do audio. Oh. I will put it here in the chat. Maybe someone can help me. It's playing on my end. I showed this image at the end of the in-person session as well, where when it comes to anything on these implementations, it's very daunting and it's very scary. You're going into a room either with experts or people who are frustrated or people who are super excited. And it's important to remember that you are leading the change. You are a strong voice. And so I asked everyone to stand up and do this power pose. And it's actually, there's a lot of science behind the fact that when you do a power pose, when you stand up and you put your chest up high and you put your arms like this and you stand like that for about a minute and you think about, you visualize exactly what it is that you want to do. I'm already feeling my body start to tingle and get that dopamine rush. It really kind of encourages you to walk into that room and to empower the people that are in front of you. So I ask that next time you're about to walk into a room of D365 experts and you're nervous or you have to give a speech, think about this power pose and do it and see how you feel.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. That's great session. Hope everybody enjoyed it as much as I do. I mean, the change management, I think, is something that we think about it, and then we often think about it just as training and minimize it. And as a project manager, I was listening to you and I could think about, I get in the trap of like, we just got to move forward. We got to move forward. We got to move forward. And if we have this resistance, it's okay, well, we got to try to minimize the resistance so that we can continue to get the project moving forward. And I'm a great believer in, particularly in Dynamics, helping the key end adopters of the solution, the end users, be receiving some out of the box orientation on what the product is. And that helps, smooth out the resistance, because it's often like in my CRM world, if you show them advanced find and they can see, they can pick and choose and move columns and, or whatever, create their own views, those types of things, it empowers them. And then they're less concerned about, oh, well, I have 100 reports I have to get. I got to make sure I get this and I got to make sure I get that. And it just creates that anxiety, like you said, going on a trip without knowing where you're going, right? I think that's a great analogy. I love that. Anybody else want to comment on it? Anybody else had, yeah, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. That was another great presentation. I don't want to put you on the spot. This is kind of a bigger question because I currently work with quite a few different Microsoft partners or ISVs that are getting into the AI space and things are changing very fast. Like 5 days is 5 years with the different technologies that come out. And I was actually sitting down with one of them yesterday, and we were having a conversation about, you know, how do you know if you're rolling out stuff that people aren't ready for? Like if somebody goes and adds all these new features and does a bunch of cool stuff and puts it in a product, and then somebody says, well, I didn't want that, and now I don't want to pay the kind of money that I have for it. And obviously this applies to even if it's an executive doing an internal project. So my question is, you know, how do you evaluate the cost of change ahead of time to kind of walk people through the stages so that they're ready for the change when it comes?
That's a good question. I spontaneously thought of an answer, and I'm going to take a second to reformulate it. So my spontaneous thought was just to, at the beginning, to ensure that you have a really good feedback loop. So like I said, is incorporating people into the change, incorporating people into the project. So whether it's through a Microsoft form, whether it's through informal, focus groups or meetings, those are the ways that you're going to know that you're on the right path. So the way that what you're saying almost makes me think of that first image that I showed, where here we are, we have this really fancy smancy car, we have a Ferrari sitting in the driveway. I wanted to surprise you, but now I don't know how to drive it, or it's too much for me, it's overwhelming. And so I do think that bringing people along, and there's multiple different ways that you can do it. The one that I've used the most really is just focus group and Microsoft Forms. And you can actually do it also in ADO. If you're using an ADO tool, like for any of your like implementations, there's a really good retrospective tool in ADO, so you can track everything as you go throughout your project. But the feedback loop is just invaluable, because then you're going to get people who don't like it, and that's okay. But for me, the weigh-in equals buy-in, regardless if it was negative or positive, at least throughout the process. Maybe it was a small golden nugget that you were able to pull from a piece of feedback of, oh, we were going to configure it in this way, or we were going to launch this specific extension, but perhaps we would only do a portion of that. So depending on, what it is that you're rolling out, maybe it's like you don't do the whole thing, you do a portion because that's what people are ready for, knowing that there would be a phase 2.
Yeah, so incorporate people in their own baby steps, more or less.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense.
Any other questions? Jen, you want to go ahead?
The only comment that I'll make to that is I completely agree with the baby steps. And getting them involved in the process of identifying what is the must-have, the should-have, and the nice-to-have. It helps to have them see that there's a stage and a process, right? That they'll end up getting what they want, but they've got to, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? How do they step into that? And then if in the documentation, the requirements doc, and getting them involved in that feedback loop and all of that, they know that it won't be forgotten, that it's just, they'll buy in, not this, I thought we were going to do all of this. No, hold on. You're not ready for that. I think that helps as well.
Awesome.
And one thing to keep in mind, that you can still do all of that. And one thing to think about, and because it's all about timing. So you can go live, and within those 2 weeks of go live, you can feel, or the reactions of people can feel as though you made the wrong choice, or you didn't do it in the right way. Because in those 2 weeks, people are, all of a sudden, they were playing in the sandbox, they were playing in something that didn't really affect their overall business. And now, poof, all of a sudden, if I make a mistake, production will not roll out. That truck will not leave the facility. Money will not come back to the company. And it is so stressful. And we have this cortisol actually like shoots up in your body. And I was actually just doing a podcast with Bobby a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this, and I was saying when the cortisol comes into your body, you actually freeze. And there's these even things called fainting goats that get so much cortisol in their body that they fall over. And so those are things that are important too, where everyone has their own reactions, and the reactions are normal. So for even you as the person who's designing or implementing, it's important to remember that it's normal. And let's see, okay, they're reacting like this now. let me give them some time and a little bit more opportunity, a little bit more leeway, and let's see how this goes.
Yeah,
Awesome.
makes
Thank
perfect
you.
sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, Stephanie. Great presentation.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next segment here. So this ends at the top of the hour. So just leave me a couple of minutes at the end. Take as much remaining time as you like.
No worries. My topic's pretty boring, so people will probably fall asleep anyways, and that's okay. Yeah, so thank you to the organizers for giving me the space to share these points with you guys. Super grateful to be back in this room with everybody, and thanks again to Stephanie for a great presentation. I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Stephanie before, so yeah, definitely good to get to do that again. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to talk to you about just some couple AI use cases, my favorite features between ChatGPT, Microsoft 365 Copilot, GitHub Copilot, the variety of the AI family, and kind of just what that looks like on a day-to-day basis in my role as an AI engineer. And although I'm going to show you a couple of examples, I want to make it perfectly clear that this is really more about helping you understand how to think in a way that allows you to create and autonomously build your own ideas and build your own use cases and build your own ways of using the tools that are emerging within our day-to-day lives. So without further ado, if you haven't met me before, my name is Will Hawkins. I'm the lead data scientist and founder of Right Way AI, which is a people-centered AI engineering and consulting firm. So we work with Microsoft ISVs, systems integrators, partners, and customers to essentially enable AI innovation depending on where you are in the Microsoft stack. So that's more or less what we do. I have a book about all this kind of stuff. If that's something you're interested in, just let me know. That basically covers the last 12 months 18 months of what's gone on in the AI space and what that transformation has looked like. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Now, what are kind of the key ways that I use AI in my day-to-day life? Number one, and it's fitting for this conversation, is education. This is something I started doing right when ChatGPT came out, actually, because I spent a lot of time reading Microsoft documentation. This is a real life example of me in a Microsoft doc. And what I'm showing you here for some preface is what's called the Feynman technique. The Feynman technique is basically a way of breaking down a concept to be able to understand and share that information in a comprehensive way. So what I do here is I ask Copilot to take this blob of text that doesn't quite make sense to me, and I say, can you explain what this means using the Feynman technique? Hopefully you guys can see that okay. Let me know if you can't. And I want you to watch what happens. So it actually gives me a step-by-step explanation. So it's giving me, key things that I'd be asking questions about. What are the important topics of this blurb? What are the things that I need to kind of break away and put together piece by piece? And then what I really love, if I don't skip the video, is the very end. You can see it gives a very simplified example. It basically explains it in an analogy that would make a lot of sense. And what's super impactful about this is because I'm often learning things and re-explaining them to clients or on some of these calls or whatever, is I not only do I learn it really fast, I actually can share that information in an equally accelerated fashion, right? Because now, not only did I go ahead and learn what this means in less time, I also gave myself an example and basically a script so that if I wanted to explain this to somebody else, which is obviously the best way to learn something, I can do that, almost instantaneously. So that's honestly the most key thing that I use it for on a day-to-day basis, whether that's doing research, whether that's looking at, a new product feature, whatever it may be. And obviously super good, especially in the world that we are right now where technology changes so fast. You can find something, a concept that you don't really know much about, sit down, ask it this question. It's a template that you can use over and over and over again, and it'll produce the same kind of reply every time. So I found that to be very helpful for helping me accelerate my own learning. System communication is another one. As a developer, I spend a lot of time flip-flopping from different languages, whether that's writing DAX queries in Power BI, whether it's writing Python functions, C#, HTML. Like, I change languages so fast sometimes that I lose track of it. And that's a really great feature of not just ChatGPT, but GitHub Copilot. So for example, in this case, this would be a standard data manipulation script that I would write if I was doing just some initial data analysis. it's going to go ahead and write that in Python. That's really cool. It goes ahead and spits out all the information that I asked for. And now what I want you to see down here is I've actually asked it to port this script to another language called transactional SQL. Because for example, when I work in Microsoft Fabric, the environment actually goes back and forth between those languages interchangeably. So I have to know how to use both. And I don't study all the code that I write. I lose track of some of the syntax of the language. This is a really easy way for me to keep on track of it. And the other really nice thing is that I can edit this within the window. And same thing with GitHub Copilot. So if I don't like that, you know, the status is opportunity and I want it to be status closed, I can change that right within the line of code. So that's primarily more for developers, but it is definitely something that you can consider for practically anything. You know, if you just kind of word vomit what you want to do into the solution and ask for it to be translated or ported to another language, whatever that may be, whether it's code or you know, another form of communication, it's a super powerful way of doing that. And then this is probably one of my favorite because it's probably the most significant, especially in the work that we do. You know, we just kind of talked a lot about communication. I'd argue that communication is the hardest skill for any human being to master because there's infinite levels of better communication. And I use ChatGPT and Copilot to help me flesh out unformed thoughts when I'm doing complex communications. And I'd like to preface too that it's not I have it tell me what to say or what to write. You can see here in this example, this is actually from a real life client case where I wasn't quite sure where I stood with the client. I just wanted to get some feedback to understand, you know, if there was something that they were unhappy with or if there's a different way that they wanted to move forward with projects. So I gave, you know, the O1 model because it's more structured around advanced reasoning. I gave it an example of what I was already kind of writing, like here's my draft of the initial email that I'd like to send to the CEO. And I had to just come back with tips and kind of rewrite it in a way that might get a few other points across that maybe I'm not pulling off because again, like it's very hard to become a master of communication at any level. And there's always ways that you can be better and more delicate and deliberate with the way that you communicate. So I know there's lots of examples of M365 Copilot being used to write emails or drafting emails, but if anybody's received an automated email before or one written by a Copilot, you can see it from a mile away. So this is much more of a collaborative process. You know, I'm not just telling it, hey, do the work for me. I actually want you to educate me on where I can improve my communication so that I know how to do it better the next time. And I've got one more since we're getting close to time. So the last one that I wanted to show is not this one. I'm going to skip ahead because I wanted to talk about optimization problems because I think this is a pretty cool one. So this is an example from my actual personal life where, you know, these models that have been coming out, I think are something that people don't quite understand how to fully use yet. Like I was talking to a client yesterday and they're asking me, do I use 4.0 for this use case? Do I use 0.1 for this use case? Like what is my best option in this case? And I want to explain exactly where you would use something like an 0.1 model, particularly for optimization problems. So this is a example. I'm planning on hosting a party in the near future. I've got a menu and I have all of these parameters. There's dietary restrictions. There's a budget. There's a number of guests. There can't be seafood. There's all these constraints. And for me to sit there and plug through that menu for a couple hours would take me quite a bit. This did it in 3 minutes. And what's really cool about this is it actually explains, okay, here's the explanation of why I came up with the answer I came up with. Now, it does take a bit longer to get a response, but you can see like it went through a very deliberate process of making a decision on what things to include in the menu. And that educates me so that I know how to get a better understanding of how it's learning how to optimize so that I can support and back it up. But also gives me an understanding of, you know, what the optimal way of structuring this thing is. And the reason I say that is because I actually did a comparison with a friend of mine who did the exact same prompt with 4.0, and 4.0 was more expensive, returned a budget that was a bit closer to 2,000, and it had less food options. So anyways, that's more or less what I wanted to show. There's a couple other ones that I can send in the deck that I provided, but that's a couple useful ways that I use it today. So thank you guys for the time and space to share that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I think it was great.
Want to add something, Jen?
I thought it was great. struggle with the amount of time I spend drafting emails that are supposed to be so eloquent and refined. And what I have found, I would be interested in your feedback, Will, is I have found that ChatGPT is a little bit better with the subtle nuances. And I can say, you know, draft an email. I haven't met this person before, blah, and it does that. Whereas Copilot a little less soft. I didn't know if you've found that as well.
Yep, that's a good point. So what I wanted to, and that's kind of, I think, the crux of the difference here between an 01 versus a 4.0. So what I can share is that what ChatGPT often has that I prefer over at Microsoft Copilot is the newest stuff will get rolled out right there. Like M365 Copilot, you'll have to wait a little bit just because that's the nature of how they've structured the SaaS offering. So M365 Copilot uses 4.0, which is a bit more generalized, flavorful, doesn't have the in-depth thinking that the 01 model does. So I bet you if you took that same message and threw it into 01, you'd find a difference in the response that you get.
Okay.
And I'll
That's
just,
great.
I'll add that in my organization, we're actively studying and, you know, we're using AI to help with our delivery, but we're actually studying different ways to use AI to make our delivery even more effective. We're piloting it in a couple of regions. So I'd love to show them, Will, some of the things that you've done for the delivery team. Right.
Cool.
Anybody else have any comments?
I have a question, but it'll take much longer than we have here, Will. So maybe we need a part two. It's just really about the data residency behind all the AIs and just the implication of, you know, for Canadian firms, for instance, working in a US world kind of thing. So I know it's a bigger conversation, but it is so, and I'm going to have to put this into ChatGPT with the Microsoft documentation like you showed, because it's so hard to make heads and tails of it sometimes. So, but that data residency thing is very nuanced and very tricky.
Here's a suggestion. I think our next meeting is March 27th. And
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
You're hosting or picking topics. You can invite me back for your my favorite topic discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So Will, I will reach out to you.
Yeah, good segue into, do you have a foreshadow, Tanya, at all on what we're going to see in
you know,
March?
coincidentally, AI is always on my top of my list, Nancy. So I had really planned to try to focus it on AI. So I think we honestly could take years to get through AI content, but I think it's really important. I think we all need to make sure it's part of our practices and how we can equip our clients and our audience to be more fluent in it. Just anything that we can do to kind of speed things up. So that would be the area of focus for March.
Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. That sounds great. And I know we're getting really close to time. One thing that I just came upon yesterday that I think is the most important thing, and I'll probably make a video about it soon. ChatGPT no longer has your data getting trained by the model off by default. It's on by default. So if you use ChatGPT and you have a subscription, jump into settings and then scroll down to data controls where it says improve the model for everyone. Turn that off, because if it's on, your data goes to them and you get your stuff trained on it. And I use this for different client materials. So data sovereignty wise, really important to make sure you have that off. Microsoft, different story, but definitely look at that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We're at the top of the hour.
So great job, everyone.
Thank you. And I'll circulate the materials midweek next week.
Okay, and bring any
Stephanie.
feedback you might have. We love to hear it.
Yeah.
See you in March.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you,
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.